Perfect. Thank you so much. So I think I will go straight to my own experience as someone that has lived with disability half of my life. So I lived half of my life without an impairment. And what was really staggering was that the day one that I sit in a wheelchair, many rides that I took for granted just disappeared just because, I could no longer use my legs. I became a second-class citizen, and that was back in Brazil. You have to become a disability advocate because anything that you will do in your life, you need to always be self-advocating. And I have to become a disability advocate, not because I wanted to, I would rather spend my time doing other stuff, but you have to always be advocating for yourself and for others. Then after moving to New Zealand, was really shocking for me to find out that there was no accessibility legislation here, when in Brazil, since the year 2000, we have a really well-established accessibility legislation. So whenever I have a situation where I face it, discrimination, because you guys need to understand that lack of accessibility equals discrimination, might not be direct discrimination, might be indirect discrimination, but it is lack of accessibility is discrimination. And I remember my first experience here was when I saw a brand new branch of the ANZ Bank, brand new, Queen Street, and it was not accessible. And I remember that I went there, called the media, and a week later, some 10-year-old kids say that they found a solution, and there was like a lift, very simple lift. So you see, we need to have a way to enforce accessibility. So the 24% of the population that identify as having a disability can have equal access and fully participate. So that was my first experience. Then my other experience was I was using the ferry to go to work, and I received a call from Auckland Transport saying that I should use a different way of transport because the ferry was not accessible and I was putting others at risk because they need to help me to get into the ferry. Can you imagine that? You're being asked to use a different public transport service. Public, that's, and it's every day and it's everywhere. Then the cherry on top of the cake, I would say, is that when I moved from Auckland to Tauranga, I couldn't find any place that was accessible because I'm a wheelchair user. So the main challenge is always the bathroom. And I spent 6 months showering in the porch until I could find a solution. Can you imagine that? You have to shower in the porch because there's no accessible houses. There is no place where you can go that it will suit you. The crazy thing is that the solution found was to put a portable kind of shower that cost $30,000 of public money. And it shouldn't, So retrofitting and trying to amend things after, it's way more expensive. And we will be doing a favor to not only all people with disabilities, but for everybody that, might grow older and have some access needs, or might break a leg and need crutches for some time, or for mommies with the babies, or for, for everybody. If we use universal design. Now it's Christmas time. How many people, how many families cannot have some of their loved ones in their own places to come together because their houses are not accessible, and it's every day and it's everywhere. I think I was listening to the other oral submissions and everybody's on the same page about the frustration with this bill. And I ask myself, as someone that has been advocating for the creation of accessibility legislation since the get-go, since I moved to New Zealand, what else we need to do to be heard? What else we need to do? We do petition, we do campaigns, we talk to the media. What else we need to do? Tell me. I actually, instead of, I want to make questions. Where is so difficult to implement a policy that will benefit the whole entire country? You know, I want to answer. So please, any of you can address, where is the roadblocks? What else do you want from the disability community to be heard? We'll be saying for over and over and over, you know, that there's no accessible houses, that kids don't have access to inclusive education, that every day that someone that uses a wheelchair, you have to do always a massive plan, check out all these places, you know, and it's always the burden is on the person. Now it's summertime. Summertime is a time of extremely frustration for me because I can't go to the beach, you know, because you go there, there is no mat, there is no, and then what do? You just watch others enjoying. And then I want to take my niece to the playground. She's 7-year-old and she actually did her submission as well. I can't push her in the swing because there's a bloody barrier that prevents me from getting into the playground. And the thing is, having a disability is not something bad. You know, it's part of our human diversity. And for many years, segregation has been preventing the rest of our society from learning, from, you know, from understanding, from getting the benefits of living in a diverse society. The other thing that is really shocking, and I think this should be in the legislation as well, and that's one of the calls for the Access Matters, is the accessibility legislation to be a lens through which you can filter and prevent other legislations to keep discriminating. So Jen Log, you might know, took me 7 years fighting to stay in this country. I am immense legal battle with Immigration New Zealand because of systemic discrimination, systemic barriers in the immigration system that want to single out people with disabilities from this country. You know, we need to look ourselves in the mirror and see, okay, am I doing really all that I can do as a member of the parliament to address this massive issue that is relevant to 24% of the population directly, but indirectly, you have, you know, that affects me, my everyday, but I have my mom, I have my sister, I have my niece, and our interactions are also affected because of lack of accessibility. So, yeah, I just want to answer what else do you want from the disability community? Do we need to do like the Americans did and occupy the parliament and do, you know, what else is needed to be heard? That's my question for all of you.
Okay, well, thank you, Juliana, for another submission in which, you know, you've brought lived experience into the room and you've made it that much plainer to all of us, just what it is like to be living with disability in this community and what the need is. I'm just looking around the room and yep, we have Jan wanting to ask a question. Jan.
Thanks, Juliana. There's two things actually, if I could. It's very clear, and I can't answer the question you've put to us. I'm hoping through the process of this committee, we'll have some good discussions, and maybe nothing else will be required. Maybe we'll get there. If you've seen the Human Rights Commission submission, where they're proposing that the minister has the responsibility for accessibility standards in secondary legislation, and there be an additional regulatory body for enforcing them. I guess my core question is, do you think we can fix this legislation with idea, and do you support that idea? Or do you think it needs to start again? And what would that mean?
I think we don't have time to start again, you know. We need to get this right now and not stop with the talking. I don't know, I don't understand completely like the legislative process and what is out of scope, you know, and how much change we can make into the current bill. But the bill as it is, honestly, it's rubbish. It's a joke. It's a bad taste joke. And what the Human Rights Commission is suggesting, yeah, that would be great if we can have that. And if we can just shove in that information and make that into the bill, perfect. Because we don't need to reinvent the wheel as well. You know, we're not vanguard here, you know, creating something new. No, just look around other countries, even a country like Brazil, you know, that you can learn from.
Cool. Thank you.
And we need action fast, you know, because every time the more we delay with getting action and actually creating those standards and making them enforceable, every day public money is going to create new barriers every day, and that will cost 10 times more to undo those barriers. You know, like, it's just what people don't get it is that I imagine that the main concern is like, oh my God, costs. Think outside of the box, you know. If we have this accessibility revolution, that's what I see. Imagine there will be the accessibility industry, the same way that is already in Brazil. You have like recruitment agencies specialized in recruiting people with disabilities because we have a quota system. You know, you have businesses that just operate like finding new solutions to make what seems impossible to be accessible possible, because we have a lot of historical buildings, for example, and you'll find the most amazing solutions, you know, to make it accessible.
If we outside the box. Listen, and if we learn from others' experiences. Listen, thank you very much. We are actually at time. I have noticed Maureen did have her hand up. Maureen, are you?
Very quick one, if I can, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Juliana, you mentioned the example that you've got experience with in Brazil. Are you aware of other countries that do it well that we could look to?
Yeah, you can look at America, you can look at Switzerland, you can look at Canada, you can look even in Australia, you know, if you don't want to look that far. You can look at, yeah, I would say look at America, look at Brazil, look at Switzerland, Norway.
Great.
The EU, we have
Yeah.
Australia and America and Canada we have on our radar, but I don't believe we've had Brazil on our radar.
No.
So that's really interesting. And thank you very much. We weren't aware.
Yeah.
The progress Brazil.
So I worked for 8 years in the parliament of my state back in Brazil. The parliament was accessible. We had MPs that were disabled. And even when you go to, I don't know how to call it, but where you go to stand and speak and do your speech, that was accessible. There were lifts to that. Everything was accessible. There was like, I don't know, historical buildings, as I said, you know, that you should preserve. They were accessible.
Well, it's really interesting. As someone who was recently on crutches, double crutches for some time, I'm vividly aware how inaccessible our parliament is.
Yeah, you had a taste. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And it was a very minor taste. So, yes. Listen, thank you very much.